y'all doing this evening? Uh, yeah, the music. I've heard your complaints, and I am responding. People don't like the ambience and the mood I be trying to set, so I did the music. How about that? So no more music in the background. That's it. It's locked in, and that's what we're gonna do. Um, Sorry, I'm actually just came running up. I was running late, but I'm here on time. I might not come when you want me, but I'm always right on time. So I was running a little late because I lost track of time. I tried to schedule a meeting for this evening, knowing the BroDiallo broadcast was on deck, and I did it. I did. I think I achieved it, but it was a little bit more hectic than I like. And I don't like being under the pressure or under the gun. But I'm very, very, very happy that I made it. So anyway, uh, I can't be long, but I will be strong. I'm trying to get through this discussion for this evening. Shout out to everyone that tuned in last week after our little hiatus. I appreciate y'all. And we're definitely going to be back on schedule with new stuff coming on the African World Order channel. If you're not subscribed to African World Order on the tube, go subscribe to African World Order. We'll be broadcasting Wednesday. Tomorrow, day after tomorrow, Skip and I are going to be discussing the platform of the various political parties, not just the mainstream, the duopoly, where we will be discussing their stated platform and how likely they are to achieve or stick to, or how sincere they are in their stated platform and their stated political agendas. But we're also going to talk about the Socialist Party, maybe the Revolutionary Communists. I don't know yet. Definitely the Socialist, Libertarian, Freedom, and Green Party. We're going to be discussing the platforms of the third party alternatives and what would a world look like under such administration. So definitely tune in and subscribe for the Rational Radical discussions and Q&As, question, comments, and criticism. All right, so let's jump in both feet. First of all, I want to let the community know that we do have snitches out here. I'll be coming on here talking to on the BroDiallo broadcast, thinking I'm saying things in confidence with my community, and people run back and snitch and go tell my wife things I said or things I might have said, which ain't cool, but I guess that's what you gotta live with, that people run tell that. So now I will be watching my mouth as I've been instructed to be more mindful of how I phrase things and what I share about my life that don't pertain to the liberation struggle. Anyway, so that's that. I definitely have been bothered this week by everybody, by Janet Jackson and Kamala's blackness, because again, I asked people about where was the smoke for Obama being identified the black president, where was the smoke for Bob Marley being a Rastafarian African. It seems like this confusion about, first of all, it's a lot of lies. There's a lot of lies. A lot of people are claiming about what Kamala stated or what Kamala has done in terms of her identity and her race that I haven't seen evidence of. So people are making accusations against Kamala, right? Sorry, y'all get mad when I mispronounce her name. I don't know why. But people are making statements about Kamala and her positions as though she has pretended to be black or denied her heritage or recently adopted a black identity. And I ask for evidence of this, because when I see actual recordings and writings on her talking about her race and heritage, when I look at the trajectory of her life, it seems she has conducted herself like most other biracial or multiracial people. And because there is such antagonisms and hostilities between various racial groups, what often happens is a person under mixed heritage, they tend to align and identify with one or the other. Because you can't really say, well, I'm biracial and I'm going to live equally in both communities, because both communities ain't equal. And not only are both communities are not equal, one community oppresses the other. So what I find amongst from my own interactions and my own relatives who are biracial or multiracial is that they tend to rock with one or the other, but they can't really get with both. But that's me. That's just me. But what also disturbs me is, like I said, people from the right, conservatives, white people, pretending to be confused or upset. Because when Obama was running for president, they were saying shit like, Obama's so brilliant because he's half white. It is Obama's white half that allows him to go to Harvard and to be so articulate and so upwardly mobile. So if he wasn't half white or mixed heritage, he would have no chance of achieving at the level he does. That's one thing they were saying. And here's another thing that was a problem with Obama. If you go back to Ann Coulter and the coked out culture, remember the white conservatives during Obama's campaign were upset because they said he was denying his white half and being exclusively black. So they were like, Obama's only being black and he's denying his white half. And so they always play in our faces about race. When the concrete reality is, as I told y'all last week, white people only acknowledge two races, white and non-white. That's the only two races that white people acknowledge. They might come and tell you all this other shit. Even the white progressives, even the white liberals, all white folks need to know is, can you be identified as white exclusively? No, then you're over there. Then you get the whips and the chains and all that other shit. And even though we understand that people of biracial, mixed race heritage aren't classified, if you're into that strict classification, cannot be classified as black. When you look at their social status throughout history, chattel slavery, Jim Crow, civil rights struggle, and even in today, in the era of institutional racism, covert racism, we find that we've always had to, because there was a time, who was saying it? I don't remember who said it, but their only option was to live amongst us. And they had to decide whether and there are populations, like in South Africa, where there was a colored class, where mixed race and non-black, non-white people were consciously and deliberately created a caste and gradient. This also exists in Latin America. There are other places like Ghana under Rawlins, where Rawlins was of mixed race, and he was a giant of Africa, an anti-colonial freedom fighter, and where he didn't play that. So we've had eras where Africans, where you had populations of mixed race people who align with the oppressed, and we have populations of mixed race people who were created as a comprador class or as a buffer class between the Africans and the whites who oppressed, colonized, or enslaved them. But we've always had this interactions, but was always understood is that mixed race people still had the status of non-white, and therefore the status of slave, the status of colonized, the status of second-class citizens. And now in 2024, we got people that are ready to, that, and it's not even retroactive, which is weird as fuck. It was, I don't know about him being related to the Bushes and all that. But I know if you're going to say anything, So as far as Kamala's racial heritage, and everybody's up in arms and angry about or asserting that Kamala isn't black and making that a part of the whole, no, this is the same old camera. I don't have a new camera. I don't know where you get that from, Mark. It's the same camera, just a different lighting. I changed the lighting a little bit because why not? Anyway, all that to say is most of these arguments and positions about Kamala's racial identity, or how Kamala has expressed or lived out her racial identity or do not comport with the record. Most of the arguments that I'm seeing and hearing come straight from the MAGA, Trump, Heritage Foundation, ultra-conservative wing. Black people adopting and regurgitating right-wing fascist propaganda. I'm seeing conscious Black people share links from places like Sky News, Daily Mail, Fox News, Candace Owens, and all of these scumbag anti-Black sources that they believe are all of a sudden so concerned about protecting the integrity of the definition and identity of Blackness. Even Janet Jackson. Even Janet Jackson, y'all willing to starting to call her auntie, and y'all showing them decades old pictures of the Jacksons and the afros. Well, I took it upon myself to go look up a modern day picture. And if anybody should be aligned with and embracing Kamala, it should be Janet Jackson. Because if it was up to her and her siblings, we'd all be Kamalas. Wouldn't be a non-mixed Black person on the face of the earth. So this is very peculiar to me. Until I see evidence otherwise, I think this dispute is based in two things: sexism, because Obama didn't get that same smoke, and right-wing fascist propaganda. And every time someone's like, Kamala was playing Black, and now she all of a sudden Kamala was Indian her whole life, and all of a sudden started being Black. I said, can you demonstrate or can you show me where that happened? Now, again, I don't support Kamala. I have no intention of voting for Kamala. I think that Kamala and Trump are both unworthy to govern anyone. And they're both illegitimate. And I think Trump is definitely should be on trial. Let me say that. Trump should be on trial for international war crimes. Kamala, because she is not an executive yet, but she was vice president, so she can't be held accountable for the crimes of Biden. But I have no doubt that she has every intention in continuing the crimes of Biden. You know. So this is not an endorsement of Kamala. This is because I don't care. This is more a concern about how susceptible the Black community is to right-wing propaganda. How flawlessly and how effortlessly we can adopt a right-wing talking point and really think it came from us. And every time someone shares a link or a quote, I go and follow that link or quote, and it inevitably leads me back. It inevitably leads me back to a right-wing racist fascist site. I don't see any legitimate sources of this position of this argument. Every legitimate, conscious, progressive opponent of Kamala's candidacy focuses on her being a neoliberal politician and part of the status quo neoliberal capitalist party, her being advocating for imperialism and being pro-imperialistic policies, and her history as a overreaching predatory prosecutor. That is the problem, not accusations or pretending to be confused about her racial heritage and her racial lineage. That is not a legitimate criticisms or reason to reject a politician. Her alleged sexual history, her alleged former sexual partners, or even accusations that she slept her way to the top. Bullshit that she didn't answer questions, all this shit. None of those are legitimate reasons. Those are all reactionary, racist, sexist, right-wing, racist critiques, criticisms, and justifications for opposition. Again, her publicly articulated, verified policy positions. Her publicly verified, articulated policy positions. Her history in public service as a senator and a prosecutor. Her support and contributions to the mass incarceration campaign coming out of California. If people are saying I do not support, I'm not with her, I criticize her for those reasons, then we can discuss it. I agree with you. If you see anyone attacking Kamala, believe you me, you're on that same hit list as Kamala. Attacking Kamala based on, again, her sexual history, or oh, is she black? What is she? We don't even know what she is. I think it's even fair. People will share videos where she was on with the Indian woman from The Office. And the Indian woman was like, oh, yeah, these are our culture. These are blah, blah, blah. And she said, half my family looks like you. And like I said, I didn't know y'all became so pure. I didn't know y'all became so strict. Y'all gave everybody from Bob Marley to Barack Obama a pass. But now all of a sudden we drawing the line in the sand with Kamala. Fine. But that needs to be retroactive. That needs to be retroactive. And I got a list of people of biracial heritage that we have acknowledged or accepted as black that y'all gonna have to let go of. And many of them are Pan-African revolutionaries, freedom fighters, liberationists. But it's mad peculiar. And that's what I want to talk about today, because what concerns me more, I'm indifferent to Kamala. I'm indifferent to her as an individual. I'm in opposition to her policies. I'm in opposition to her candidacy. I am indifferent to her status, her marriage status, her thing. And let me tell you something, because I had a talk with a brother I know is on point on everything, but we had a fight because he told me that Kamala slept her way to the top. But I have to tell you this. When you assert that a woman or a man slept them way to the top, that is not a condemnation. You're basically talking about someone who was exploited, abused. The villain in the condition of someone sleeping their way to the top, the villain is the one who elevated them to the top as a result of sexual favor, not the one who had sex to get to the top. You don't understand that? So when you say Kamala slept her way to the top, you're not condemning Kamala. You're condemning patriarchy. You're condemning whatever men in authority that took advantage of a woman who was trying to raise up through the ranks. So if a woman who is skilled, capable, and available to accomplish a task, to do a job, to fill a position, but she has to also utilize sexual favors, you are condemning the men. How can you condemn the woman who slept her way to the top, which completely doesn't even take into a factor the men who demanded sexual favors for elevation? So I've never heard that in my life. Oh, that guy, he's a piece of shit. He demanded sexual favors for elevation. This man requested sexual favors for elevation. I never hear that. We condemn women who slept their way to the top. And that would not be a possibility if there was not the unjust hierarchies created between men and women in power and positions of power and employment. That would not be the case. And that shit's really sick that we attack victims of a practice, because we all know about the casting couch and all that shit. We all know about it. And we condemn and mock the victims of it as opposed to condemning those who create and sustain it. So saying someone slept their way to the top is akin to saying someone is an affirmative action hire, a DEI hire. That speaks nothing to their capabilities or even their worthiness. You're only speaking to the fact that they were abused and exploited and vulnerable. And I just couldn't get them to see that. Oh, she slept her way to the top. I'm like, even if that's the truth, that's a condemnation of the men she encountered as she went to the top, not a condemnation of her. Because I'm pretty sure if me, old black man, walked into any type of corporate place or any place where that has that hierarchy, I know I couldn't be like, show a little thigh, wear a tighter shirt. Them dudes would throw me out, drag me out of there. So it ain't about the person. You sleeping your way to the top is not something you're able to decide yourself you're going to do. It's something that's imposed on you. No, Lead, you can't condemn both. You can't both sides. When there's a victim and a predator, you can't condemn both. You can't condemn both when there's a victim and when there is a power and status and resource hierarchy. So the person seeking resources and status is not the same as the person who holds resources and status, especially when that person who holds on to the resources and status got it unjustly. And I'll just say blankly, there's no source of concentrated wealth, status, or power anywhere on this planet presently that is legitimate, that was got through justice. What I'm saying is, so if what people are saying about Kamala is true, she slept her way to the top. That is a condemnation of patriarchy, not a condemnation of women who are victimized by patriarchy. But I tell you, brothers, you notice the brothers down here like, what? It's real hard for they to understand. You know, brothers get on some weird, real shit because brothers fully comprehend power divergence. When a brother steals a candy bar and runs up the block and gets shot in the back by the cop, brothers are real clear on like, hey, even though he committed a crime, what happened? Even though the brother is a victim. And when people come in like, well, if he didn't want to get shot, he shouldn't have stole the candy bar. But then when it comes to issues of patriarchy, sexism, misogyny, brothers get real fucking cloudy. And it's getting exhausting. Oh, yeah, these women, these females, it's treasonous. Let me tell you, being an Uncle Tom is not just a black person who doesn't acknowledge racism, who aligns with racism, who validates racist positions. I think you're a fucking sellout too if you do so for patriarchy and for sexist positions too, because patriarchy is hand in hand. I can't find a fucking system of racism and discrimination that was not also patriarchal. So if you're propping up patriarchy, you're propping up one of the cornerstones of racism and Western white hegemony. So you're a fucking Uncle Tom if you're a sexist. Go educate your goddamn self. Man, but I'm getting out ahead of myself. I want to talk about chocolate-coated fascism. Because fascism, like I said, my issue, the reason why I'm constantly arguing, debating, and bumping heads on this Kamala issue is not because I support Kamala. I will not be voting for Kamala. I do not support Kamala's candidacy. I, again, have no doubt that she will continue the status quo. She advocates for the status quo. So I do not support Kamala's presidency. But Kamala, whether she is successful or not, will eventually fade. And there are conditions and realities that have been here before Kamala, or let me call her candidate Harris, before Harris was ever selected to be a VP, before she was ever voted into the Senate, before she ever passed the bar and became a predatory there are conditions and realities that African people have to deal with that predate her and will post-date her. Whether she wins the election or has it stolen again by Trump, because that's the only way Trump can win is if they cheat and steal and lie. So whether she wins and takes office or she has the presidency stolen from her, the same way Al Gore, Hillary Clinton, the same way, like I said, and I can back this up, there hasn't been a Republican to take office without cheating and in committing massive fraud since Dwight D. Eisenhower. Every single successful Republican presidency has gotten there through fraud, corruption, theft. Nixon, both of the Bushes, Daddy Bush, Baby Bush, Ronald the Reagan, and even old Trump lost to Hillary by 3. And I know some of y'all are like, how dare you? But the record show, even conservative political scientists. I mean, and let me tell you, what's the guy's name? I can't remember his name. I've read like 5 of his books, and I can't even remember his name. And I met him at Greg Palast. Greg Palast. If you want to know about U.S. elections and what's the real issue, see how. Let me tell you something. Democrats are not above cheating. And if you can demonstrate, because that's what you just got to believe. He said the Republicans cheat. They got to either or. Democrats have a lot of issues, but Democrats don't have to cheat because they have a plurality. They don't have to cheat. The problem with the Democrats is they don't oppose cheating. Go and look all over the fucking countries. Both parties participate in gerrymandering, but that doesn't qualify as cheating because gerrymandering is illegal. But look at who's purging ballots. Look who's trying to pass legislation from the federal level to the state and local level to reduce access to the ballot. Look at who's promoting myths about illegal immigrants voting. So if you can say, well, that I'm not saying Democrats don't cheat, but I'm saying I don't see evidence of them motherfuckers cheating. But I see evidence of Democrats not opposing cheating and not putting up effective opposition to cheating because they get more votes than everybody else. So why the fuck do they need to cheat? And if you have evidence as opposed to a knee-jerk reaction saying, well, he's talking about Democrats, Republicans cheating, so I'm gotta just come back with the fucking whiplash. What about? Let me tell you something. I'm evidence and facts based, regardless of how I feel. I know there's a lot of passion, a lot of energy, and even emotion behind what I say. But the fucking foundation and core of what I tell to you is based on evidence and facts. I'm secular as fuck. I don't have no use for faith or belief. I go off of what I know. And if you know something I don't, then put the fucking link in or come on live and show us where to go. Tell me about the presidential election that was stolen by a Democrat. Show me about Democrats cooperating with foreign powers to keep hostages and not to release hostages, refusing to negotiate. Show me the fucking evidence and I'll call out the Democratic cheating. Now, I've been studying and steeped in this shit since 1992. That's the first election cycle. The 1992 presidential election cycle is the first time I really got into politics, was old enough to vote and participate in politics, and I've been following and engaged with U.S. politics, but it ain't even start there going forward because I've been looking at the history of this shit too. And let me tell you something. Even if I don't like a motherfucker, Again, let me just say this. My real opposition, I'm not defending Kamala. I'm not defending the Democrats. I'm defending rational, critical thinking. So when I see my people engaged in irrational, right-wing, reactionary thinking, when I see my community being vulnerable to right-wing propaganda, regurgitating and sharing links from right-wing, racist, fascist propaganda sites, that's what concerns me, because that shit will last long after Kamala's gone, long after Harris Wall's ticket either takes candidacy or not. The intellectual, the ideological disruption and corruption will last a fucking lifetime, long before any 4-year political cycle. And I look at myself like, how are we so fucking vulnerable and receptive to right-wing fascist ideas, lies, myths, points of views? And I'm even seeing, I'll see somebody literally share a link from the Daily Mail, sharing quotes and videos that are favorable of the Trump administration, and y'all motherfuckers, I'm seeing all this anti amongst the so-called conscious black community, all this smoke for Kamala. And y'all act like she's the only person running for president. Her and Trump are neck and neck. Her and Trump are neck and neck. Trump is very much a potential winner. And I don't see nobody even raising the alarm in our community about a potential a second term for Trump. I don't see nobody sharing about Trump being convicted of sexual crimes, preying on other people. I don't see no fucking smoke for Trump. Where the fuck? Now, I could see if it was a landslide, she was 20 points ahead, that it was guaranteed that she's going to be the next elected official. Then I'd be like, yeah, well, don't even talk about Trump. He's a non-factor. But literally, these two politicians are neck and neck. How the fuck you got smoke for this potential faction, but no smoke for the other faction, when both factions basically have an equal chance at taking power? But I digress. It hurts my heart. Again, there's a lot of shit I can tolerate from my community, my people. There's a lot. There's a lot of shit I see going on that don't sit well with me. But one of the biggest issues, one of the biggest problems I see in our community is that black people going ideologically astray. That's one of the biggest issues. That's one of the biggest fucking problems for me. Menticide, that's all it is. Anti-academic, ahistorical, and anti-intellectual. And then people drawing conclusions based on inaccurate or false information. And not only are you people are so shitty that I'm going to draw wrong conclusions based on inaccurate information. I'm going to spread it throughout my hood. And you go from being a victim of propaganda to being a vector of propaganda. It's not only are you sick, you want to spread the sickness. You want to spread the sickness there. You ain't content just being sick your damn self. You want to make everybody else as sick and backwards as you. But I want to talk about it. You know, we just had a black man be exposed for being a black Nazi. This black man of God, this black man who wanted to protect values, the family, this Robinson weirdo. And I'm like, I've said this before and I've said it a lot. There's no ideological, social, cultural sickness that these white folks have created that black people, that not some population of black people have embraced. The only ideological, cultural, social sicknesses that Europeans have created that does not have a significant number of black adherents are those ones that explicitly and strictly exclude us. Those are the only ones. The ones that don't explicitly and aggressively exclude black people, we're going to go with them. No matter how much history, you can have a practice, an ideology, a value system, a social pact that has a history of not just being racist, but committing massacres against African people, colonizing, enslaving, dehumanizing against African people. And the moment they open their doors to allow Africans through the door, they get a deluge of black people. Because of the integrationist ideology, the integrationist mentality defines for us that our very humanity rests on being in proximity with white folks. If you got a group of black people standing over minding those business, they're segregated. You got a group of white people standing somewhere, you just got people standing somewhere. But if we don't have the access and don't have the presence of white folks, we're suffering. This has been cultivated in us. And another thing that we didn't tend to think of, we wanted integration and equality with white people. And we really thought that being equal to white people didn't mean that we would be equal to white people. Because all the good things you think about white folks, they speak standard English. They have low cholesterol. I don't know what the fuck y'all. I don't even know what's good. I can't list the good things about white folks. And forgive me, because I know there's some good white folks out there. But the real good white people out here is not the one y'all trying to integrate with. The anarchists, the socialists, the animal liberationists, Antifa, the true radical feminists, not the TERFs, but the real radical feminists that want to destroy all hierarchies, anti-communist, the white majority that y'all really want, not the white radical far left, not the Smedley Butlers, the mainstream white folks y'all want to integrate. So for whatever you think are good about them people, when I say some good things about white folks, their communities are clean because exploited immigrant labor keeps it that way. You ever been to a white neighborhood that couldn't afford exploited migrant laborers? Let me tell you, I've seen some poor white neighborhoods that look worse than any fucking project or hood I've ever. But I digress. What's good? White folks, they have low cholesterol. What else I say? Whatever you think was good about white folks. So you be equal to white people and then you get the shit they got. But did you really think that being equal with somebody would only transfer the good qualities? When we said we want equality, did we only think we would get the good shit? Or did some of y'all think there weren't even any liabilities or bad shit to be had? Because everything's right with these people. So it stands to fact that if you become equal with a person who is anti-black, you have to be anti-black. If you become equal with the people who engaged in reactionary repressive violence, you have to engage in reactionary repressive violence. If you're equal to a person who is predatory, colonial, imperialist, anti-immigrant, apocalyptic, omnicidal, then it stands to reason that we also would adopt those points of view, that ideology, that culture, that value system. Martin, and see, somebody's trying to give me good white folks. Martin Luther was an anti-Semitic fucking scumbag. He was not about trying to liberate anybody. He created a vicious religion that was just as vicious as the one he was leaving. And he was nothing but a stooge. He was a useful idiot to the merchants and the lower ranking monarchs to go up against the established church, because the established church was the backbone of the established monarchy. So Martin Luther is not a hero in anybody's history that knows his true history of the Protestant Reformation. The Protestant Reformation, just like the American Revolution, was not some noble good act. There you go. Black people wasn't trying to get equal with it. That's a white folk we should be getting equality from. But then you notice you get a good white person like John Brown. Hell, let's like John Brown, what's that guy? The other abolitionist, even the peaceful Amish abolitionist who wouldn't engage in violence. They ain't trying to rock with them white folks. But I digress. So I want to talk why black people are why fascism is so attractive and so pervasive in the overall black community. One of the reasons why fascism, or I call it chocolate-coated fascism, is because fascism is ill-defined, or it's hard to define. Some people call it reactionary hyper-nationalism. They got these long, but the problem, as I said before with fascism, is that fascists don't like to be called fascists, just like racists don't like to be called racist. Claude Anderson said 30 years ago, I live in a racist country, but if I walk outside, I can't find one fucking racist. I live in a racist country, but if I go outside in my community, I could travel all over America and not meet one racist. And the moment a white person stands up and says, I'm a racist, he becomes ostracized instead of elevated. Even racists will do some racism. And then when you say that was racist, they'll deny that they did a racism. It's the same thing with fascists. White folks love racism, but don't nobody want to be identified as a racism. They also love fascism, but fascism doesn't want to be identified. Now, fascism is better identified by its characteristics than by a fixed definition. You can go look up the definition of fascism, and more likely than not, they will define or describe characteristics of fascism as opposed to saying this is what fascism is. And so, keeping with the tradition of, and here's the thing about fascism. I'm guilty of this. I am guilty of this. So I'm not even trying to tear nobody down. Progressive leftists use fascism the same way right-wingers and reactionaries use communism. So generally, if you look at a right-winger, they call everything communist that they don't like. So Obama was a communist. Public school is communism. Gun control or gun restrictions are communism. Everything. Restrictions on carbon emissions is communism. Kamala is a communist. So everything they don't like, especially in the political arena, but even in the societal arena, everything they don't like is communism. And everything that happens in society that they don't align themselves with is evidence that communism is taken over. If you watch any right-wing reactionary media, you hear that. Now, the left-wing equivalent to that is fascism. So we on the left call everything we don't like fascism. And any societal changes that are occurring, fascist. So I've even been like, oh, Obama, he's a fascist. Oh, the fucking fascist. I've done that myself. And so I think it's okay to do that. But the problem comes that if you're calling everything fascist, and then some real fascism starts to emerge, cop pulls you over and gives you a ticket, even though you were only 3 miles over the limit, that's fascist. The fascist cop gave me a ticket. The professor wouldn't allow you to turn in your paper late. That fascist professor. He could have given me an extra 2 days. So, and again, here's the thing. If fascism, when a true fascist and true fascism emerge, but you spend your time calling everything you didn't like neoliberalism, status quo liberalism, a entrenched oligarchy, if you call everything fascist, when true fascism emerge, emerges, you won't really recognize it. You'll end up in a position saying, "Oh, it's just like what we've always dealt with." So that is something. And again, I'm not condemning. This criticism is a criticism of myself as well. So I was very comfortable with just throwing fascists out. Anybody that was centrist, anybody that was pro-capitalist, anybody that I felt was to the right of me on the political spectrum, I could just dissolve you fascists, get out of my face. But now fascism's at the door. They didn't let the fascism in the door. They didn't let the fascism in the door. And I see people that are like, "Oh, it ain't nothing new. It's all the same." And that's a few people say it's all the same. Other people are like, they welcoming. They're like, yes, some solutions. Now, this is what, let me tell you something, the most accurate description of fascism. Let me tell you the most accurate description of fascism. Because fascism does have, it's like the beast of a thousand backs. It has a lot of faces, like racism. You have institutional racism. You have conscious racism. You have overt racism and covert racism. It has many faces, but the ultimate outcome is the same. So you look at racism as the outcomes, and then you work your way back to find out what is the specific sort. The specific racism, the exploitation, dehumanization, and the subhuman status of non-white people. But if you go to Latin America, racism manifests different than in the U.S. You go over to Europe, and they swear, "Oh, well, racism is only a problem in America." You go to South Africa, it's like, "Oh, we solved racism. We had a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Racism done. Let's move on." Fascism is the same way. So if you lock yourself in, and the fascists are both cowards and liars. So you can't lock them down on anything. They do some slick fascist shit and then they run away from it. Anyway, let me tell you the coldest, bloodiest definition of fascism. I'm going to tell you the coldest, bloodiest definition of fascism. That is, fascism is capitalism's immune system, meaning that fascism emerges when the discontentment of capitalism, discontentment with capitalism begins to come or begins to approach or surpass the suppression methods. So capitalism is an innately unjust system based on hyper exploitation and destruction of human bodies and ecosystems. And all living things, exploit all living things to their utter collapse. And so first, capitalism starts off making concessions and giving shit to people. But as people begin to dwell under capitalism and the capitalists begin to increase their efficiency and their ability to extract and concentrate wealth, more and more people become discontent. So they might give you some vacation days, some paternity leave. They might put a daycare center in your corporate office. They might give you high interest credit card loans so that where your pay, the deficits in your pay, you can use a credit card to make it to the next payday. They give you little shit, tuition assistance. But eventually, the capitalists, their main goal of existence is accumulation. So if I'm giving you a daycare center in the corporate headquarters, if I'm giving you student loans or student assistance, if I'm giving you affordable mortgages with reasonable and stable interest rates, eventually I'm going to be like, "God damn, they always going to be pulling back. Right? So they're not just, capitalists do not go into an ecosystem and say, "Okay, we're just going to mine the coal from this system. Or we're just going to cut the lumber from in this system. We're just going to clear, cut, and burn and slash, hack and slash and graze cattle And we're just going to dump some nuclear waste and pollution on this system. When you'll notice when the capitalism enter a space, they're going to do all that shit. There's I think it was Abraham Lincoln, who basically said the European only wants one thing. The European only wants one thing, and that's more. That's it. That's the only word that all capitalists, the only position that all capitalists shares, we only want one thing, and that's more. Nothing more than more. Or Abraham Lincoln's also said the only thing the settler wants is a plot of land and the land adjacent to that land. That's reasonable. All I want is my own little plot of land and the land adjacent to that land. That's not unreasonable. That land, that land, that land, that land. It's never ending, right? And so as someone who says, well, hell, not only I live in a capitalist system, which grants me my freedom and democracy. And in fact, due to capitalist propaganda, they say, well, capitalism and democracy coexist. And if you have any other economic system besides capitalist, then you live in a communist system, which means you have no freedoms. And these motherfuckers say that with a straight face, with the highest incarceration rate in the history of humankind, with surveillance. They got fucking cameras at stoplights, while allowing private corporations to track your keystrokes. Your damn thing knows everything, whether you prefer skinny jeans or baggy jeans. They know before you do. They know whether or not the whatever winter trends are coming, the Sherlin coats, the 8-ball jackets, they already know ahead of time what is the winter trend in winter of 2024, 2025, what is going to be the hottest shit. And they know which people are going to go with which trends. They already know what cardigans I'm going to be sporting all winter and fall. They know, like, if you like big breasts or big hips. They track your searches, they track your interests, and at the same time, they look you in your face and says, capitalism gives you freedom. And what's worse than them lying to you is you accepting the lie unquestioningly and then spreading that lie to the next man or woman. But I digress. But what I'm trying to show you, where fascism come on the deck, come through the door. So you got the workers who create the wealth. Nobody creates wealth but the workers, the laborers. That's the source of work. That is not, I mean, I know I'm about to go into Marx, but Marx was on fucking point. Marx was on point. It really bothers me that so many black people don't like Karl Marx, and they always say Karl Marx was a racist. And I've tried to look for the Karl Marx racism. Maybe I'm so enamored by his dialectics, by his analysis, that I just miss the racism when I read him. So I'm like, where's the Marx racism? But what I like to say to motherfuckers who say Marx is a racist, the father, the capitalist equivalence of Marx is Adam Smith. I've never heard a black person tell me Adam Smith is racist. Not once. So if a black person says, I'm a communist, I'm a socialist, we need to nationalize all the resources. We need to tear down the multinational corporations. We need to do away with private property. Eat the rich. First thing a black person says is, Marx was a racist. You sitting over there quoting Marx. Marx is a racist. But I never, and I'm waiting for my chance. I ain't had it yet. For a brother to say, man, I'm about to open this business. I'm about to secure the bag. I'm about to get paid generational wealth. I'm about to break this generational curse. Boy, I'm about to get it. So let's get it. And I'm like, but did you know that Adam Smith was a racist? How dare you? If I can't do communism because Marx is a racist, then you can't fucking do capitalism because the father of capitalism. You go read Wealth of Nations, and if you read the Wealth of Nations, he essentially advocates or excuses slavery, saying it is a necessary stepping stone to development and industrialization. Adam Smith was receptive and understanding of slavery. Where I look at Marx from throughout everything I've heard him say about slavery, where he said the slave has every right to rise up and cut the throat of his enslaver, and that slavery is a natural outcome of this system, which means we abolish the system. We can do away with the impetus for holding people in bondage labor. So Adam Smith says, yeah, I know slavery is probably not all that good, but what choice do we have? He was sympathetic to slavery, where Marx, I didn't read. So, but maybe y'all know more and y'all got more access to information than I do. But I continue to digress. What am I saying? The capitalist, by nature of being a capitalist, will pollute the very soil that his children stand on, will contaminate the very water that his own children drink, will pollute the very air that his children breathe. So he can't, by nature of being a capitalist, give a fuck. And you wonder why do all these rich people, why they all into sex trafficking and lack of consent? You have enough money where you can get people to consensually be with you, because the very mentality required to be a good capitalist, a successful capitalist, is the same mentality that allows you to prey on people and treat them like commodities. You cannot treat the ecosystem, animals, labor like a commodity, but that commodification mentality won't seep into your sex life and your personal life. Let me tell you, what you do in life, what you take out there. That's why a lot of soldiers, I can't come home anymore. I never leave the battlefield. I'm married to a professor, and believe you me, she never off the clock. She teaching and lecturing nonstop. So that's how it is. And people go and want to be with a capitalist. It's an old saying, you marry for money, you're going to earn every penny. But I digress. Let me get back to this analogy. God damn. So what happened was, as the capitalists continued capitalizing and the workers continued to generate wealth and then have that wealth stolen from them, discontentment starts to boil over. And so capitalism employs several means. It employs propaganda. It gives limited temporary concessions. It will give you hope in the afterlife. Well, your reward is in the sky. It gives you religion. It loves spoon feeding its victims religion. Capitalism and religion, even though most religious texts from Islam, if there were true Christians in Islam, cannot coexist under capitalism, but you got billionaire, multi-billionaire and millionaire ministers and millionaires and oligarchical sheiks and imams. You even got billionaire, millionaire Buddhists that ain't supposed to exist. Right? That's like a capitalist, like a vegan owning a cattle ranch. How? You lying about something. But anyway, because first of all, usury, that boom, right there, boom, capitalism is over. You take away usury, and the Bible, the Quran, and the Torah both says usury is a sin. And that is fundamental to capitalism, the economic system of capitalism. Usury, no capitalism. So how the fuck we got a world full of Muslims and Christians and got capitalism take over the world at the same time? Somebody lying. But I digress. Find that quote, Lead. Find that quote. Or if you don't find and share that quote before the end of this show, I'm gonna put your ass in timeout. So now, to give you some motivation, let's see. Put user in timeout. Yeah, I can put it. Lead, you find that quote. You find that quote for me that says Marx, that American was a good idea. I'm gonna put your ass in timeout. You have till 8:30. It's about to be consequences up in the comment line. But I digress. I continue. Y'all won't let me get through this. See, I'm blaming y'all. Y'all not even here. So anyway, as that discontentment, the capitalists prefer to use ways to suppress the working population. They choose to employ ways to suppress the population without employing methods that disrupt the flow of currency. So how do I suppress 99% of the population without disrupting the economic system, the flow of resources from the masses into the hands of the few. So when all of their other techniques and methods break down and the people become so outraged of capitalist exploitation, that's when the wealthy elites, who are very often very liberal in how they live their lives, they're very progressive in how they navigate the world, they begin to foment fascist rebellion, fascist uprising, fascist organizations, fascist think tank, fascist popular media. Because what a fascist is, most often, a person who has legitimate grievances, but targets people who did not cause that grievance. So you have white men who are like, I am the master of my domain. I am to be the king of my castle. All of my hopes, dreams, and ambitions are valid and should be validated. And if I don't have the money, the education, the status, the woman, the mobility that the world owes me, then I will lash out violently. Which makes sense. If the world is denying you what God seeks you to have, I think violence is a reasonable response. But the caveat comes to say, well, who the fuck is denying me what I deserve? Fascists never say the capitalists, the elites, the CEOs. They always say two groups: persecuted people and those in society who advocate for the persecuted. Now, often the people who advocate for the persecuted aren't even sincere. They're not even sincere in their advocacy. The people who are advocating for the persecuted are often exploiting the persecuted they damn self. But the fascists who do not take time to engage in class analysis and a historical analysis, they often just lash out at whoever the elite tell them is hurting them. So fascists say immigrants, minorities, women, the gays, the transgenders, even disabled people asking for all these rights and getting all these concessions. And not just women, but particular type of women. Single mothers, women who assert their own humanity, and women who refuse to have sex with me. And they begin to say that there is some ominous force out there that is destroying our values, that is destroying our country. This ominous, nameless, faceless force, this Illuminati. And this ominous force is controlling, this faceless force is controlling the discontent minorities. So when the minorities rise up, because they're facing more intensive discrimination and hardship than I am. Now, so when the minorities rise up and engage in rebellion, they're being controlled by an ominous, unnamed, unseen force. Now, when I rise up and I go to the Capitol and run up in the Capitol building and kick and chase the senators, have to run into a bunker, and I run up in the Capitol and smear feces on the walls, then I'm doing it for a righteous cause. I don't know why, and I'm sharing this from a right wing, so I don't know why we don't talk about this more. I've been to so many. I honestly would have to sit down for a while to figure out how many protests I've went to. I've gone to way too many protests. A few of those protests, there was violent conflicts between counter protesters or people shoving against the police. I mean, even since the Occupy movements, and I was going to the Occupy encampments. I was at the Free Palestine encampment over at University of Chicago. All I'm saying is all of the progressive leftist black protest, I ain't seen no shit like this shit. So when I run to my own Capitol building and smear my own urine and feces throughout the Capitol, then I'm doing it not because I'm brainwashed, not because some unseen, unknown force, some unnamed billionaire who's funding some think tank, who's funding some social media guy to put out fascist propaganda. That's not why I'm doing this. I'm doing it because I have taken the red pill. I'm red pilled. I'm awakened, not woke, but I am awakened. So that's what fascism does. Fascism redirects the legitimate rage of the working masses against other victims. Because there's no way you can say, well, society is deteriorating and it's the transgenders, when the vast majority of us do not interact with transgender people as we come and go. And the more conservative you are, the more heartland. And many of us who do interact with transgender people don't even know their status, unless because transgender people know they are targeted and scapegoated and can face violence. So they just pass, like a lot of black people, quote unquote, biracial black people used to do, just pass to get by. Because if somebody finds out your true status, they'll do violence against you and then call you the obsessed predator when they want to beat and attack you. So that's how fascist. But there are other components of fascism that is very attractive to black men. I'm saying black men, but let me say black folks. Even though conservatism, right-wing fascism is a very macho point of view. It hates femininity and things that are feminine. Fascism seeks to subordinate feminism. In fact, they think that the feminine, not the feminism, but the feminine is degrading and needs to be returned to a point of subordination and isolation. But prior to black integration, it was quite rare to find black conservatives because black people were part of the group. But after integration, we got black CEOs, we got brothers, and brothers started integrating and elevating within the patriarchal system, getting opportunities. They weren't worth it. But as we integrated, now we're full Americans. We were second-class citizens. And if you look at the civil rights movement, if you look at the Black Power era, if you go back to Jim Crow, African people, although we had many clashes with migrant communities, you'll find that the basic sentiment and outlook of African people was one of solidarity and understanding, because we were like, America ain't no good. The bugger got no shame. And so we all in the same boat. But then we got our civil rights and our full status as citizens and equality with our oppressors. And even though that's all an illusion, everything I just listed was an illusion, black people started acting equal to white folks. Even though this always existed, you had more and more black people talking about, this is my country. This is our country. These immigrants here to replace us, these immigrants. And so black people, black men specifically, I mean, I haven't done this study, but I could easily throw it out as 25 to 50 to 1 as far as black men versus black women who embrace right-wing, reactionary, proto-fascist, full-blown fascist ideology. I mean, we got Candace Owens, but she's almost the exception that proves the rule. But I digress. So let me point out the components of fascism that is attractive to African people and makes us vulnerable. Number one, African people, there is a system that is against us. We are denied our just resources, payment for our labor. We are a displaced population. All of that is true. But if you are an African person under such oppression and discrimination, and you misidentify the source of the discrimination and you misidentify the benefactors. When you misidentify the source and you misidentify the benefactors, you can go from being an awakened, conscious African person, aware of your oppressor, aware of your oppression, and willing to engage in actions to oppose your oppressor and your oppression, to being a Black person who validates the systems and institutions and organizations and even individuals that oppress you because you're fucking stupid. Now, let me scratch that part. You're not stupid. You're misinformed. So I, as an African man, and I cannot get full employment, and I blame immigrants and migrants for taking my Black job. You go from being a person aware of his exploitation to a person who validates it. The first thing you have to understand about life, any persistent societal scale problem, is created, imposed, and sustained by people in power. People who do not hold institutional power cannot create societal scale problems. They cannot sustain societal scale problems. And they do not profit or benefit from societal scale problems, whether it is injustice, discrimination, underemployment, pollution. So anytime you're talking about a problem that affects yours, now you could be talking about a problem that affects you personally. You live somewhere and you got inconsiderate neighbors who litter and play loud music. And you can look directly at your neighbor, even if they're poor, even if they're immigrants, even if they're LGBTQAI, and be like, that's an asshole. People are rude. Sorry about that. I should turn my phone. Unprofessional. So you can look at a personal scale problem and say, this person who is a disabled migrant, gay or lesbian woman. So this person is under all the oppressions, all the discriminations, Black. And if they're littering and blasting music on your block, you could be like, this person's an asshole. And they're disrupting my enjoyment of my little community, my little corner of the world. You could say that, and nobody can say, well, you're being discriminatory, you're targeting the LGBT, you're being insensitive to the disabled, you're doing blah, 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 unless they're playing loud stuff has something to do they can't hear and they're littering because they don't have the capacity to pick up. That's different. So maybe, but if they have the capacity to do that and they're just being, so that's something different. And nobody would fault you for that. Where they like to say, oh, yeah, the woke, being woke, they won't let you can't, if a gay person does something, you can't criticize them. If a woman does something, you can't criticize her. Nobody says that shit. So that's one thing. I got a neighbor who's inconsiderate, and I have a problem with that neighbor. Versus, I can't find a secure job. And when I do find a job, it doesn't pay me enough fucking money. And even when I got that job, they brought in a bunch of people who had no legal status to be here and gave that job to them and fired me. They're taking resources, tax and other resources, and shunting them away from needy, poor Black communities and giving them to migrant communities. None of that shit is the fault of the migrant. It's so fucking weird that the only people that can take jobs, I know Black folks, I got brothers, I got one homie. 1 year, and this is not a lie, we were roommates. Early 20s. I was just wrapping up my studies, about to secure my certificate and get out there and make the big bucks. And I had a roommate, and he 1 year had gotten like 6 or 7 W-2s. He had gotten like 6 or 7 W-2s. And, some of the W-2s, $300-400. And he couldn't get anybody H&R Block to do his taxes. He's like, dude, you made like $11,000 this whole year, but you got all these W-2s. So Black people, we've never had job security in this country. Since the end of slavery, no Black person had a consistent job. From the moment they had to pay us for our labor, we've always been insecure on labor. First fired, last hired. And let me tell you something. We had that when an immigrant was an Italian, when the immigrants were German, when the immigrants were Irish, when the immigrants were Vietnamese, Laotian, Hmong, and now the immigrants are Venezuelan and Honduran. That's always been a consistent status, and it has nothing. So you are a victim of right-wing reactionary fascist propaganda that if you look at Black job insecurity, Black economic instability, and you want to target the newest batch of exploited refugees as the source of your problem, because that is not the source of the problem. But because Black people have a long history of economic instability due to economic warfare, Black people are not poor because we buy Jordans or acrylic nails. Black people have been robbed of trillions of dollars of our wealth through public and private sector economic warfare and subversion. That is the source of Black people's problem, not because we don't invest, not because we don't support Black businesses. It is nothing more. Lead, I told you to find me the quote. I told you to find me the direct quote, and you know I'm going to back it up. I've read The Poverty of Philosophy. What page is it on? I got a copy of it. I'll go get my copy and we'll read it together, where he said slavery was a good thing, Lead. You getting closer to your suspension. You got 10 minutes left. Hey, James got a new profile picture. Look at that handsome brother. See, my allies, I got some good-looking brothers on deck. And I'm secure enough in my masculinity to say it. I like your new profile picture, James. Watch out, ladies. Watch out there now. Anyway, so if you're a person, a Black man who says, listen, my economic condition is a byproduct of capitalism, entrenched economic policies coming from the banking system, the credit system, the elected officials who are elected to represent my interests, but go there and violate my interests on behalf of the capitalist funders of their campaigns, then you are an asset to the community. But if you say, they took my Black job, they took my Black job, you are a liability to the community and the cause. But that be Black people simply being aware that you're being abused or taken advantage of, then read the quote or post it. I'll bring you on. But anyway, so it's the same thing. But it ain't even immigrants. We got Black men out here saying Black women are taking our jobs. So women saying that Black men, and here's the thing. I've been listening. I've been around the conscious community so long. I remember before the rhetoric about the Black man's effeminization. I remember when that shit first came out, because I bought into it. I was raised, well, up until I was 11 years old, I was Methodist. I converted my family, my whole family, all of us went from Methodist to Baptist. And I was baptized Baptist at 12 years old. And when I was baptized, I was given this beautiful Bible. It was one of the most expensive things I owned. I think somebody paid for it. I still got that Bible. It's all marked up, highlighted, and notes all through it. You want to come on and read it? Just type a part of it or share the link to it so everybody can read it together. You play around. What was I saying? And so I had a Bible. I think that Bible was like $75, $85. I never had a pair of shoes and never had a shirt or any single artifact that I could call my own, piece of my personal property that cost as much as the Bible, which makes so much fucking sense. But anyway, that church taught me that women were the ones who caused the downfall of man. And because Adam failed to exert his authority over Eve, she was seduced by the snake and then seduced him. And that men, if they don't continue to exercise their dominance over women, will be collapsed. I was taught that women were cursed, and the pains of birth and the unpleasantness that she experienced at birth was a byproduct of the punishment that she received for causing the downfall of man, Jezebel. I was taught that in the time of revelation, that for a man to take on the persona and garb and behaviors of a woman was a harbinger of the end times. So I'm raised on this. And then that was like 12 years old. I read that shit and believed that shit with my full chest until I was maybe 14, 15. When I was 14, 15, I started reading Kwame Ture. I started reading Check Out the Job. I started reading Dr. Ben. And I was learning. I even was reading, remember back in the day, Albert Churchward? And I'm like, the Bible's some bullshit. The Bible is some bullshit. And I abandoned the Bible. I abandoned the church. But the indoctrination, I was into, and my grandma, she wasn't no Sunday Christian. I was on the usher board. I was in the choir. I would go canvassing on Saturday, door to door, to spread the gospel. I was in youth fellowship. I used to go to Kids Across America, Kanakuk, Christian summer camps. Not even because it was Christian, but because it was free and it got me out the hood over the summer. My grandma was like, I'd rather have him out in the Tennessee forest than running around East Hills Village projects getting shot at. So I was out in the Christian day camp. So even though I left the church, I held tightly to the indoctrination. And I'd be out here saying Christianity, white man religion, all this shit. But I'm still like, yeah, my woman has to be submit. And these females, these gay men are evidence of apocalypse. So anyway, I started reading about the rise of women was evidence of the downfall of man. As women rise in education, employment, status, wealth, that is an affront to men and a destruction of men. So we're blaming migrants, we're blaming refugees, we even going to war with our own mothers, sisters, aunties, and spouses. But fascism will validate that. Fascism says, yes, the migrants coming to take what's yours. We'll tell them the women are trying to replace you. And the women, they got roses and they got artificial insemination. Men are obsolete. Men are obsolete. And a man will be intimate with a woman, share a space, intimate space and time with a woman, and literally physically attack her as she begins to rise and he begins to fall. Even though it wasn't up to either one of them. She got the job, I didn't. The immigrant got the job, I didn't. Scheherazade Ali, who is the scum of the earth, I acknowledge. Scheherazade Ali, I can't really quote, but there's only one thing I can quote from her. And she said, the white man is the god of jobs. So anytime you arguing about jobs, you mad about jobs, you think you should be more jobs, you think the wrong person getting the job, if you ain't battling the white capitalist, then what the fuck are you doing? So there are certain conditions that African men are subjected to, certain concerns that we have that are validated by fascist and fascism. The fact that there is an ominous threat, but the threat is not faceless. It is not nameless. It has a name, white hegemony, capitalism. It has a location, banks, corporate-sponsored think tank, multinational corporation headquarters, the Capitol building, the state Capitol building, city hall, penitentiary. It is not reptilians. It is not Illuminati. And like I said all the time, black men, because we are so oppressed, we like to think that there is some supervillain out there, or that our oppressors have supernatural or otherworldly identities. It damages the ego of a man to think that, goddamn, I'm oppressed by bureaucrats. I'm upended. My life is derailed by public policy legislated in my local legislature. We like to imagine ourselves fighting some grand battle and race war on the battlefield, when a lot of shit that we have to deal with can be remedied through a lecture hall, through mass mobilization. And you literally have people that won't engage in a leafleting campaign, but they'll swear up and down to you they're ready for the war, and they got all these weapons at home. As soon as the big war starts, they'll be on the front lines. But they won't even work to bring about, to raise those contradictions to the level where we can engage in open combat with the capitalist and the imperialist. But I digress. There's another component: restoration of the family. The African family has been deliberately and relentlessly targeted. Now, one of the problems with the fascists is its narrow definition of family, which has contradicted the reality of the African family forever. I just went down to Macomb, Mississippi. I went to the roots. I went and saw with my own eyes the little cabin that had no indoor running water, that had no electricity, that my wife's grandparents built with their own hands, up in the Mississippi woods. And they want to restore the house and make it a historical site. Back when the main mode of transportation was some old mule, the same mule you had to use to till the land was the mule you would let your wife ride to work, ride to church, so she wouldn't get the hem of her skirt dirty. And so, but the one thing that defines the African family is not a father in the home. And I know y'all hate to hear that. Let me just give y'all a moment to get the absence of the black father. What is harming the black family is that we've abandoned our adaptability. We had African families and formations that were able to endure chattel slavery and the height of Jim Crow violence, poverty. And even in that time, they could snatch them back in the time where black people, because you got black people who says we need to go back when we had 70% high marriage rates. At that same time, any random black man could be snatched off the tree and hung from a tree without consequence. Wouldn't be no march, wouldn't be no protest, wouldn't be no riot, wouldn't even be no kangaroo trial. And they think the family stuck together because the man was in the house. What allows black family, and I say this as a person who's been on both sides. I was raised without a father in the home. I was raised not by my single mother, but by my single grandmother. My grandmother had 6 kids. She raised them as a single mother, and then she had to adopt some of her grandkids and raise them. And I've been in a 2-parent, stable, nuclear family, black father in the home. I've been on both sides. And let me tell you, the key characteristics to sustaining and thriving is building up a larger community. Building up a larger community. The number one asset of the African family under white oppression is not a father in the home. It's adaptability. But John Henry Clark said, it is our community and culture that allowed us to endure conditions, circumstances, and treatments that had driven other communities, races, nations to extinction. It's not because we're stronger than them. It's not because we knew the land better. It is because within our culture, the multi-family, multi-generational understanding that every man in the community, adult man is an aunt, uncle, every adult woman is an auntie, where any adult could engage any child in the community for correction, support, where if one unit began to struggle, we would redistribute resources. We'd send the kid up north. Kids in trouble with the Klan. The kids once is ambitious and wants to get higher education. Send them up north. The kids up here getting caught up in this street bullshit in this big city life. Send them down south. We put him on the farm. We put him out there with the cows in the pasture to tend them. Let him reconnect. The African family adaptability.
the fluidity of the African family, the ability for us to share, that we all took responsibility for each other, the absence of I got's mine. Don't know nobody, don't say nothing to my kids. Oh, you fucked up in the game. You ain't got the bag. Even when I was coming up, I had some well-to-do relatives. Even now, I got some well-to-do relatives. But if your people are fucked up, if my uncle's out there in a nice car and he got money, he kicking it, and people know his nephews, his cousins, his little sister is out there fucked up in the game, nobody's going to respect you. And if somebody in your family is out of sorts, I've been approached with this. I got relatives who are addicted to drugs. And I had people that know my family, know my people, know the Bowies, know the Jeffersons, know the Streeters, know the Bradleys, know my family all the way back and be like, yo, I saw so-and-so's out there in the street. How you got your people out there like that? And I'd be like, listen, we put them in rehab. We did this, we did that. We did everything. And anytime they want to come home, they can come home. But they out there. You have to explain to people. If you got somebody that's a member of your unit that carries your blood and your name out there fucked up, you had to explain to other members of the community and put out, hey, we ain't got them out there like that. We ain't got them out there like that. Both of my parents are addicts. Both of them. And, I've had to tell people, I saw your mama. Yeah, well, give her my number. She got my number, and I'm working on her, and we doing what we can. At the very least, you better be like, we praying. Oh, Lord, we put it on prayer because we did everything we could materially, physically could do for that person. That's gone. Now, Shaquille O'Neal, weird ass, came out and was like, I'm rich. My kids ain't rich. I ain't giving my kids shit. And we're like, yeah, fuck them kids. Don't give them shit. Now, I love that phrase, fuck them kids. But yeah, goddamn it, that's a something parents say to just like, it's like a stress reliever. Like swinging at the wind. But that ain't, and don't know real parents mean that shit. But we got kids of famous people coming out and saying I was neglected, I was abused, and black people getting on there. They don't owe you nothing. Kids always complaining. The fuck we do that at? You're only as good as your people. Your status can only be as good as your people's status. And I don't just mean your kids and your spouse, but your aunties, cousins, and them. I ain't heard that in a long time. I remember when I used to go out and be like, don't be out there acting no damn fool, making us look bad. Individualism, which is something we adopted from white people. Even that thing in terms of, I don't owe my kids shit. So it's very attractive in fascism because fascism promotes the male-headed nuclear family and says that is the unit of the nation. The center and the core of the nation is the family. So we out here coercing women to be in relationships, shitty relationships with shitty dudes, or else you are a threat to the nation and our survivability. Had given birth to children they don't want in order to be, or else you're the enemy. And you'll tell them, but if you look at how they'll tell the single women, it's like, I ain't trying to get into no, I don't want no hierarchical nuclear family. I don't want that shit. I'm not your helpmeet. God didn't make me for that. God didn't make me at all. I evolved. So they tell those women that, oh, she's a bad, but go and look at the women who buy into that bullshit. You think they treat them any better than the women, the harlots? It's all a scam. It's all a trap. So family values is fascist. Family values is fascist. That notion that the black man must be in the home without defining how the black man must be in the home. Not as a dictator, not as a ruler, not as the final say, but as a competent, rational, supportive partner. I'm sick of people talking about the black man needs to be in the home without defining to do the fuck what. How should the black man conduct himself once he's in the home? And if you really understand how a black man should conduct himself when he's in the home, you'll understand why he's not there. And not only do black men target the black woman, then they begin to target relief programs, food stamps, WIC, housing vouchers and housing assistance, free lunch programs, because they want to make women vulnerable so that the women don't have options. And then I've heard even so-called revolutionary black people talk about welfare destroyed the black family. Not capitalism, not white hegemony, not white oppressors, but welfare. And they act like welfare created itself, even if you believe that. So when you really start to look at the disposition and mentality of many black people, you start to understand why right-wing reactionary fascist values and ideas are so pervasive. Where I had a black woman tell me yesterday that Kamala's worse than Trump. And black people can fix themselves to support Trump. Also, fascism is apocalyptic. Oh, here's another part about fascism that's very attractive. Fascism has every fascist movement has idealizes the history, idealizes the past, saying we were once very great, we were once powerful, we were once pure, we were once righteous at some past point in time. And these immigrants, these gays, these assertive women, these vulnerable people came in and destroyed what we had. And we already know about African people's relation. We was kings, we was queens, we swam in the Nile, we bathed in the Nile. The universities of Sankara, we were all scholars and scribes. Weren't no craftsmen, weren't no woodsmen, weren't no ne'er-do-wells. We were this pure, righteous, perfect people until these corrupting elements came. Say, no, we were just humans who were sovereign and free, who had a lot of fucking problems and internal issues that all people have. Like I say, if disunity was justification for enslavement and colonization, then all white people should be colonizing, because they've had more internal warfare and conflicts and more violent and bloody internal warfare and conflicts and disunity. Go back and find my show from like 6 years ago, The Myth of White Unity. And what I would always get so frustrated by when a black person would come to one of our meetings or gatherings and stand up and say, we ain't unified. That's our problem, because we ain't unified. Because if unity was the solution or disunity was the problem, the power dynamic would be completely flipped, because nobody's shown more disunity and internal violence than Europeans. Nobody's fought more persistent war against people with the same complexion as them than Europeans. From nukes to clubs and every time in between, their whole reality is conflict. It is the engine that drives their ascension. Perpetual, unyielding warfare. But I digress. So the fact that fascism tells every white man was a muscular with a six-pack and a full hair of Elvis slick hair out on the western frontier with a pickaxe in one hand and a pretty slim-waisted, narrow-hip white woman in the other arm. And he was out tilling the soil and fighting off the natives and writing the Constitution all at the same time. So they had this false history of their greatness, and they had this false narrative about how they fell from greatness, and then sells them a false solution to return them to greatness. So it's very reasonable how the same people that like we were explorers, not invaders, not parasitic, syphilis infected invaders who breathed on whole tribes and wiped them all out just by breathing on. That's how nasty and funky y'all was. We were these noble, brave invaders. exploring because of our intellectual curiosity. When all the so-called explorers were illiterate, many of them shanghaied and ended up on the boat because they were in debt. Just like that. So having a false, warped sense of your history and your former glory and greatness makes you susceptible to fascism. So it is quite obvious that because fascism takes legitimate grievances and distorts or lies about the source of your grievance and the ones who impose, fascists have this very curious phenomenon of seeing weak people, of having their enemies being at the same time weak and all powerful. So you'll find like the Nazis or like the Jews are corrupting. They're sneaky, they're weak, they're not real men, they're not willing to do real labor, but at the same time, they're all powerful. They have the most powerful. And so it's just like these effeminate men, these effeminate weak men in the government, these weak liberal men who are weak, but they run. Like the liberals are weak, but they run everything. They have all the power. These weak people have all the power. It makes no sense. Weak people have all the power, and the powerful people are being oppressed. Persecution complex. You will not find a fascist without a persecution complex. So you have people saying, what's being attacked in society? Business owners are under attack. Christians are under attack. Heterosexuals are under attack. White men are under attack. So the fascist will only acknowledge victims who aren't truly victims and will target as powerful oppressors the true victims. There are a lot of concrete, real conditions and aspects of African people that are very vulnerable to fascist lies. Many of our greatest leaders have cultivated a right-wing reactionary outlook that has made us susceptible to a fascist uprising. And one thing many Black fascists don't understand is that you are a target. You are what the fascists literally call useful idiots. Or I think because that was what they called them in there's a book called the Turner Diaries that was made popular by the Timothy McVeigh, that he read that book like it was a prophecy. But it's basically a book about this race war where white people rise up, kill off all their enemies, and retake the country. The Turner Diaries. It is called the most hateful book ever written. I don't agree with that, but it is basically a white, racist, fascist wet dream of the noble white man finally having had enough and taking up arms against the state and establishing and retaking this country for God and country. 14 words, preserve the future for white children and all that bullshit. And in that book, there was a group of people that were called LLMs, like-minded minorities. Like-minded minorities. And these are minorities who acknowledged that we were lesser beings, that minorities were lesser, that European Western culture and capitalism and Christianity is the way, the truth, and the light. And they were willing to align themselves and take up arms against the other people, the minorities who did not say, I am not inferior to white. Western culture and capitalism are not the solution. That white men are not fit to rule the world, let alone fit to rule over me. So those minorities, the disruptive minorities, the communist minorities, the gay minorities, the whites who were sympathetic to those minorities. So they had these like-minded minorities where they said, even at the height of a genocidal race war, we have black people who will fight with us. We have black people who will identify with us and fight on our side. Europeans and the most racist white men, understand, there are a not insignificant number of black men specifically who sympathize. I mean, go look at the Fresh and Fit podcast. You literally have a podcast ran by at least one black man and another dude, I think he's black too, but I don't know, where they literally had neo-Nazis on the show and was telling them, hey, say the N-word. It's cool. We'll say it. Yeah, it's cool. And the white boy said the N-word, the neo-Nazis, who's also friends with the Groypers. They call themselves the Groypers. The white boy that Kanye West was running. Kanye West is a fucking black Nazi. And y'all still wearing his fucking shoes and his old ugly ass shoes. What, Sudanese, right. So there are like-minded minorities and a lot of black people who don't even aware, who aren't fresh and fit, F-I-T, not fresh and fit. So anyway, one of the most persistent presence in the black community, Minister Louis Farrakhan, is a proto-fascist. Everything I described about black people knowing we're oppressed, knowing that there are forces against us, but misidentifying the source and the solution, that are apocalyptic and salvationist, that promote the regressive, reactionary, nuclear family, do-for-self individualism, that only has engaged in any type of violence against their own with no smoke for the oppressor. I mean, the normal culprits. Irritated Genie, Dr. Umar, Tariq Nasheed, Yvette Carnell, the entire ADOS and FBA jingoistic movements are proto-fascist black movements that get the most attention. Any type of capitalism. So if you're promoting capitalism, you are promoting fascism, especially in this investment capitalist, post-industrial capitalist age. Invest Fest, literally motivating and articulating. Nick Fuentes, thank you. I didn't even want to say his name. I didn't want to fucking put his name out there. But yes, Nick the Groyper. And I have another thing that y'all not gonna like to hear. Y'all not gonna like to hear. Christianity is a proto-fascist value system. The authoritarian, apocalyptic God, the man being God made in the flesh, made in our image, the demonization and suppression of women, the idea that you do have some great mission on high. God so loves me, he knows every hair on my head, the narcissistic outlook. Islam and Christianity, Christo and Islamofascism is real as fuck. They are not about liberation. They are about moving people from secular governance to theocratic governance. And you cannot find a theocratic governance that is not either fully fascist or has very strong fascist over and undertones. So even the things you adhere to, even the things that you support, lend themselves to a fascist ideology and eventual fascist movement. And what fascist does is it generally starts with targeting the foreigner. After it targets the foreigner and demonizes the foreigner, a lot of minorities and persecuted people within there. You will have gay people, disabled people, black people that are U.S. citizens joining with the fascists, talking about these people coming into our country. Just like Trump went from talking about Venezuelans and Mexicans and Colombians to talking about Haitis. See, he's getting closer to black. And then he's talking about Haiti and the shithole countries. And then the next thing you know, he's talking about black people in America. So they start with the foreigners, and then they begin to target the minorities within the country. After they target the minorities in the country, they target the white people or the people who are part of the majority but don't have the right ideas. You ain't the right Christian denomination. You don't support capitalism. You're not you're a white communist, a white socialist, a white pacifist. Okay, you're not a Catholic. You're a white Catholic. Okay, you're a white Protestant, but you're a Mormon. You're a Jehovah's Witness. But eventually, the ultimate outcome of capitalism is that it cannibalizes itself. It feeds upon itself. And the people, the conflicts that fascism creates, the elites, the capitalists profit from that. And then depending on the scale of the conflict of fascism, the capitalists make even more money from rebuilding after the fascist destruction. And people become so exhausted with the internal fighting of the working class because of fascism, they never get around to fighting the capitalists. So the capitalists are at the top at the beginning of the fascist conflict. And on the other side, after all the millions of deaths and the destruction and the destabilization, they're on top. They profit from the destruction and they profit from the rebuilding. Fascists are never a threat to capitalism. Fascists only attack those who are a threat or a potential or actual threat to capitalism. So it behooves every African to be leftist, to be anti-fascist. You got black people out here got more smoke for Antifa than they got for the KKK. You got more black people out here that complain about Antifa or black or white liberals than they do conservatism. So we who are anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist, anti-sexist, anti-patriarchal, you can't just be one of those things. Because if you allow any right-wing or reactionary component into your ideology, your value system, or your mission, if you tolerate or encourage any of that, then that is the crack in the foundation that will delegitimize everything you are. That's why you have organizations that can all day say the white man's the devil. We don't like the white man. But because you're patriarchal, because you're Islamicist, you're theocratic, you end up being more of a hindrance and a harm to your own people, the people you claim you want salvation and liberation for. That's why I say, and you got even people out here, revolutionaries, complaining about the left. Oh, the left is this, the left is that, and ain't got no smoke for the centrist, ain't got no smoke for the right, or even worse than attacking the left, calling people who are centrist, who are status quo, like the Democratic Party, a leftist party. Ideology is all. If your ideology is fucked up, it doesn't matter if you want full housing and healthcare. If your core ideology is what allows you to construct not just the imagination or the belief system that you have, but is going to guide and direct what material relationships you have with other people or with the ecosystem and the environment. Even if you are in opposition to the candidacy of Kamala Harris and Walz, it is your obligation to identify the sexist, patriarchal, racist, fascist components that are being risen up, the racialist, eugenicist concepts of race and purity, those that are rising up against the elevation of a woman of color, a biracial woman to the potential White House. You, at the same time you critique and oppose and try to build up political alternatives to Kamala Harris, it is still your obligation to call out, highlight, expose, and condemn any sexism, racism, fascism that also comes. You have to do both. There are a lot of black people giving a pass to sexism, misogyny, misogynoir, giving a pass to fascist, racist propaganda because it's attacking her. But the problem is, if you attack her with those elements, those toxic elements, that toxicity is going to be here long after she's gone. And that's why, if you've been following me across socials, at the same time, I'm advocating for Claudia and Karina. Here are my candidates. This is who I'm voting for in the presidential election. Get that. See if you can scan that. Pause it and scan it. I went and signed up. I went and offered my time to volunteer. These are my candidates. So at the same time, I advocate that our community votes for Claudia and Karina. I'm done with the fucking Green Party because they've been running for half a century almost. They've been running for over 40 years, been running for presidency and losing, and have not, to my liking, demonstrated any change in strategy and tactics. So I have concluded that the Green Party is content with just being a foil. They ain't not serious about taking power. Because if I lose in one election cycles, I'm going back to the drawing board and I'm coming with something new every single time I lose. And I'm going to make sure I make more progress for candidates, or if I'm serious about this political fight. Like I say, don't play with it, don't play with it, don't play with it. I don't play with politics. Ain't nothing to play about it. I explained the relationship. Capitalism. I'm talking about capitalism. Capitalism, fascism emerges. I go back and listen to the man. I'm talking about them both. They are intertwined. But anyway, at the same time, you're advocating for more viable and progressive politics. And at the same time, you're educating the communities about the illegitimacy and dangers of neoliberalism, democratic status quo politics, the Democratic Leadership Committee, and its compromised relationships with multinational corporations and institutional investors. At the same time, you're doing all that. You are critiquing and condemning and rejecting the Democratic Party based on its stated and imposed policies, its illegitimate and its immoral alliances with repressive and genocidal governments. At the same time, you have to call out people out here talking about fascist, sexist, racist, patriarchal attacks against any woman, even the women you don't like. Because it's not about defending Kamala, it's about defending womanhood. It's not about defending her racial identity. It's about establishing the fact that we're not going to listen to a goddamn racist motherfucker like Trump sit here and talk and play in our face about race. Because we know goddamn well, everybody talking about back in the day, I ain't heard nobody mention how many times Trump and his punk ass daddy, his lying ass daddy, Trump, talk about lying about their heritage. Why did Trump father change his name and lie and say he's from Northern Europe? Want to talk about Trump has lied more about his lineage and his racial heritage than Kamala has in its own record. I ain't heard nobody say nothing about the many times the federal government went and how many times they paid fines. The goddamn federal government sent in black people into Trump's real estate offices and says, we're here to rent property. And sometimes they were just like, we don't even rent to blacks. It wasn't even like, oh, we don't have any vacancies. Sorry. They didn't even do that kind of. They were like, nigga, no niggas here. Step off. I ain't heard nobody. The Central Park 5 out here trying. Donald Trump tried to murder us. I've been hearing, which I should and I agree with, about Kamala locking and keeping black folks locked up. I ain't heard nobody talk about Trump's race to sign death warrants. I ain't heard nobody say nothing like that. Trump executed more people on the way out of the office than any president in the last century. Trump was literally scrambling. He was literally scrambling to execute as many people. Y'all talk about Kamala's record, but don't tell me if you've been posting about Kamala's record and ain't said shit about Trump's bloodlust. I don't really think you give a damn about prosecution and mass incarceration. Trump was doing everything in his power to sign as many death warrants as he possibly could. So yeah, and somebody, Trump's better than Kamala. Y'all some freaks, skeezers, and weirdos, you black conservatives. Conservatism has no place in the black community because we ain't got shit within this system we're trying to conserve. Don't even come to me with that family values bullshit, because even the family unit is a capitalist. The nuclear family is a unit of production. The black liberation struggle is anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist. It must be pan-Africanist and it must be socialist. There's a lot of shit in between that you can work with, you can maneuver, you can manipulate strategies, you can manipulate tactics. You can play around with the allegiances, you can play around with the timeline and the trajectory and all that. Where you want to emphasize. You got a lot to play around with, but there's certain shit that if you are not in agreements with, if you are not aligned with, you cannot call yourself pro-black, pan-African consciousness, or even a decent or worthy African. I guess that's it. Still no time. Me and Skip go to the African World Order page and subscribe. It again, it really is upsetting to me that black people are so receptive and vulnerable to right-wing propaganda. And our African ideology must be cultivated and sustained. It's not enough to just be mad about shit. It's not enough just to be against the Democrats. It's not enough to simply be, I love black people. Revolution is ultimately an intellectual endeavor. And if you're not engaged in cogent analysis. Anyway, let me let y'all go. I appreciate y'all being here with me. I appreciate your support. Wednesday, we're going to have me and Skip on our new channel, African World Order. I got a couple of more shows. We got some sisters that are going to put together a show, African women, talking about African women's business. I told them I'd be welcome to come on and tell them how to do their show and be the, for some reason they didn't take advantage of it. So we got a lot of things. So go subscribe to African World Order, AfricanWorldOrder.com. So much coming. The biggest thing we got is Skip Coon, one of the greatest hip hop artists of this generation. Is going to be, using African World Order as a conduit to get his message and his music out. A lot of projects coming. You're going to be able to buy the album on vinyl and traditional media. We just got big things, having things, good things, nice things. So anyway, for right now, the schedule is Wednesday nights. Like I said, we got a couple of more programs in negotiation and pre-production. So, big things happening. Somebody asked me a question. Let me check. Let me see what's happening. What's happening? And I'm sorry again. I know Skip gonna make us make time. Skip is so much more disciplined than me. I guess not. Wow. Look here. Y'all. I'll put a thumbs up here. I don't know. I have a message here about the revival of EYL. And I've responded positively, but that's it. So
I don't know. I was hoping to see, based on the response to this message, whether or not EYL was coming back to EY. But you know what? I'm telling you, just stay tuned. Stay tuned about EYL. I'll have something to tell y'all coming through. But that's it. That's it, y'all. Again, I already told y'all what to look forward to. Also, this something Skip said something to me that really touched my heart. He spoke to my spirit using his language. He was like, we need to extract people from the internet and bring them to the streets. So I'm taking that to heart. I'm taking that as a mandate, something that I need to really, really bang on. So anyway, looking forward, lots of good things happening. I'm very happy, very optimistic. Go ahead and like, share, subscribe, share with your friends, enemies. Support, sustain. You can support the BroDiallo broadcast every Monday night. Become a patron. Shout out to all my patrons. Wouldn't be here without y'all. CashApp, Venmo. There's all kinds of ways to show your love and support and sustain the programming and everything. And so that's that. And I'll see y'all Wednesday night over on the African World Order channel. And we will be, again, for the next couple of AWO shows, we're going to go over the platform and proposed policies of the major and upstart parties. And we're going to look at the progressive parties and the right-wing upstart, like Libertarian and Liberty Party, and of course the two duopoly mainstream parties. So it's going to be interesting. We're going to look at policies, and then we're going to define for ourselves what policies we advocate and going to push up in this system. And I know it's going to be national, but hopefully we'll have time to get into some local policies as well. All right, that's that. Peace, y'all. See y'all next Monday with the BroDiallo broadcast. Somebody said, what about Lee? He got a pass. I gave him a hood pass. Anyway, I ain't going to check him. I tell you this, Lee, I'm going to go get my book, Poverty, Philosophy of Poverty. You email me that quote. I'll read it live on air and tell you how right you was if you can find it. And if not, at Diallo, next week we're gonna start off on, and we're gonna take Mark to court. What's Mark being great? And is Mark worthy of our we'll do that next week. Thanks for not letting talk. You mean, man, you're a mean marker. I was about to let it go, but I guess, man, don't start the next week.